It's just a birthday dinner, Evelyn. That was the sentence my daughter-in-law used to reduce 63 years of my life into an inconvenience. I was standing in my kitchen when Melissa said it, one hand wrapped around a warm coffee mug while the late afternoon rain tapped softly against the windows above the sink. The smell of cinnamon bread still lingered in the air because I had spent the morning baking Daniel's favorite loaf to freeze for him the next time he stopped by. That's the kind of thing mothers do without thinking. We remember what everyone likes. We remember allergies, anniversaries, school pickup times, preferred cake flavors, and which child refuses crust on their sandwiches. We hold entire families together quietly, so quietly that eventually people mistake our effort for something automatic. Melissa's voice came through my phone sharp and casual at the same time. The resort only had openings that week, she explained. Can't you move your birthday dinner to the following Saturday? I stared down at the reservation card sitting on my counter. La Maison Steakhouse. Table for 8. Saturday at 6:30. I had booked it 3 months earlier because my family always celebrated birthdays together. Or at least I thought we did. I already sent everyone the details, I said calmly. And your birthday is on a Tuesday anyway, Melissa replied with a little laugh. It's not like the exact date matters. I heard Daniel somewhere in the background. Muffled. Distracted. Probably looking at his laptop while she spoke for both of them like she always did. Mom, he finally said, it's really not a big deal. Not a big deal. I looked around my kitchen then. At the grocery list I'd written for Sunday dinner. At the school artwork from my grandkids still hanging on the refrigerator because Melissa said their house was too cluttered for paper drawings. At the planner near my purse filled with doctor appointments, soccer schedules, and reminders I kept for everyone else's life. Funny how the people who depend on you the most are often the first ones to act like you ask for too much. I didn't argue. That surprised Melissa, I think. Silence makes certain people uncomfortable because they expect emotion they can control. Well, she asked after a few seconds. I'm not changing the date, I answered softly. The line went quiet. I could practically feel her irritation through the phone. Okay then, she said coldly. I guess we won't make it. Daniel didn't stop her. He didn't say they'd celebrate separately. He didn't even apologize. The call ended, and the kitchen suddenly felt much larger than before. I stood there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock while my coffee slowly turned cold in my hands. Then I picked up the reservation card again and smoothed my thumb across the edge. Table for 8. I remember staring at those words longer than I should have because deep down, something inside me had already begun to shift. The morning of my birthday arrived colder than expected for early October. The kind of chilly air that slipped under the front door and settled into the hardwood floors. I woke up before sunrise out of habit, wrapped my gray cardigan tighter around myself, and walked into the kitchen while the house still sat in complete silence. For a moment, I allowed myself to pretend things were normal. I ground fresh coffee beans, toasted sourdough bread, and opened the small bakery box sitting neatly beside the stove. Vanilla buttercream with pale pink roses around the edges. Happy 63rd birthday, Mom. I had ordered the cake myself because Melissa once complained that store-bought desserts looked cheap in photos. Funny the things you remember when you spend years trying to make everyone comfortable. My phone buzzed around 7:15. I looked down quickly, expecting maybe Daniel had changed his mind overnight. Instead, it was an automated reminder from my pharmacy. I smiled to myself at how ridiculous that felt. By 8 o'clock, social media had already informed me that Melissa and Daniel were at the airport. Melissa posted a glossy picture of matching drinks with tiny umbrellas beside them. Vacation mode finally. She captioned it with a palm tree emoji. Daniel sat beside her smiling into the camera while my granddaughter Lily held up a stuffed dolphin almost bigger than her head. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. Not because they went on vacation, because not one of them had called first. Around noon, my sister Carol phoned while I was polishing silverware at the dining table. So what time should we head to the restaurant? She asked cheerfully. There was a pause before I answered. It is just going to be you and Frank tonight, I said quietly. Melissa booked a trip. Silence settled between us for a second. On your birthday? She asked carefully. I laughed softly, though it sounded strange even to me. Apparently resort schedules are very competitive these days. Carol offered to cancel out of solidarity, but I told her not to. I did not want pity. Pity feels heavier than loneliness sometimes. By 6 o'clock, I was standing outside La Maison Steakhouse in a navy blue dress I had bought 2 months earlier specifically for that evening. The fabric suddenly felt too elegant for someone eating dinner without her family. The hostess smiled warmly when I gave my name. "Right this way, Mrs. Parker. Your party has not arrived yet, but your table is ready." I nodded politely, even though something inside my chest tightened at the phrase "your party." The table sat near the back window, overlooking the river. 8 place settings. 8 folded linen napkins. 8 crystal water glasses catching the warm candlelight. For 10 minutes, I pretended they might still walk in. Maybe a delayed flight. Maybe guilt. Maybe Daniel finally remembered who taught him how to tie his shoes and stay calm during thunderstorms. But then the waiter approached gently. "Would you like me to remove a few settings for comfort?" he asked in the careful voice people use when they already understand the situation. I looked around the restaurant. Couples laughed softly over wine glasses. A little girl in the corner handed her grandmother a bouquet of yellow flowers. Somewhere behind me, someone sang "Happy Birthday." I felt something cold settle into my clarity then. Not heartbreak. Not anger. Clarity. "Yes," I answered calmly. "You can remove them." One by one, he carried the empty chairs away while I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, listening to the scrape of wood against polished floors. By the time my steak arrived, only one candle remained lit at the center of the table. My phone finally buzzed halfway through dinner. I looked down immediately. "Daniel." I opened the message slowly. "Mom, please do not make this into something bigger than it is. We will celebrate when we get back." I read it twice before locking my phone again. Then I reached for my wine glass, took a slow sip, and for the first time in years, I stopped making excuses for them in my own mind. The strange thing about humiliation is that it rarely arrives loudly. It settles quietly into ordinary moments long after everyone else has moved on. The morning after my birthday dinner, I woke up at 5:30 out of habit and stood in my kitchen staring at the second coffee cup I almost placed beside mine before remembering there was no reason to anymore. For years, every Sunday morning before church, Daniel used to stop by for coffee while Lily colored at my dining table. Melissa liked oat milk in her coffee and exactly 1 packet of raw sugar. I remembered all of it automatically, the same way people remember their own address. That morning, I slowly returned the extra mug to the cabinet and listened to the soft click of ceramic against wood. My phone stayed silent. No apology. No follow-up. No "did you get home safely?" Nothing. Around 8 o'clock, I opened social media again, even though I knew I should not. Melissa had posted another vacation photo overnight. White sand, blue water, matching sun hats for the children. Daniel smiling with one arm around her waist while Lily held up a giant plate of pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse ears. Thousands of miles away, my family looked perfectly happy. I noticed something then that I had somehow missed before. None of the photos from the past 2 years included me unless I was babysitting in the background or holding bags or serving food at a table. I was present in their lives mostly as support staff. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it felt clarifying. Like finally putting on prescription glasses after years of blurry vision. Around noon, my neighbor, Diane, knocked softly on the front door, carrying a small bouquet of grocery store carnations wrapped in clear plastic. "I realized I forgot your birthday yesterday," she said apologetically. "I hope you still had a lovely evening." Lovely. I almost laughed, but I smiled warmly instead and invited her inside for tea. Diane sat at my kitchen counter while I sliced lemon pound cake and filled the kettle. "You always make everything look effortless," she said casually while watching me move around the kitchen. I paused for a moment after she said it, because that sentence followed women like me our entire lives. Effortless. As if dinners cooked themselves. As if holidays assembled magically overnight. As if children raised themselves while mothers quietly disappeared into logistics and sacrifice. After Diane left, I opened the hallway closet where I kept my family binder. Thick white tabs separated school calendars, medical information, emergency contacts, birthdays, insurance copies, vacation schedules, and meal plans. Melissa once joked that I ran the family like a corporation. The difference was corporations usually pay the people doing the work. I sat cross-legged on the living room rug for nearly an hour flipping through pages. Soccer schedules highlighted in yellow. Lily's peanut allergy instructions. Christmas shopping budgets. Daniel's preferred pharmacy information because he always forgot to refill his prescriptions himself. Every invisible thing that kept their lives comfortable passed through my hands first. And suddenly I felt tired. Not physically, spiritually tired. Deeply tired in the kind of way sleep does not fix. My phone rang around 4 in the afternoon. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, Mom, he said carefully. His voice carried that cautious tone people use when they already know they disappointed you, but still hope you will make it easy for them. How was dinner? I looked down at the laundry basket near my feet filled with Lily's sweaters I had washed earlier that week because Melissa said her dryer shrank delicate clothes. Quiet, I answered. Mom, come on. He sighed softly. We already told you we would celebrate when we get back. Celebrate. Like my actual birthday had simply been a scheduling inconvenience. I see, I said calmly. Melissa feels bad. That sentence almost impressed me with its audacity. Melissa feels bad. Not I am sorry. Not we hurt you. Just another emotional task handed to me to manage. I walked slowly toward the kitchen window while he spoke, watching autumn leaves slide across my empty backyard patio. Daniel, I said softly. Do you know what I realized last night? Silence. You all became very comfortable assuming I would always understand. He did not answer immediately. And for the first time in years, neither did I. People notice your absence much faster when they were benefiting from your presence. That realization came quietly 2 weeks after my birthday while I stood in the cereal aisle at Kroger on a Thursday morning, holding a family-sized box of cinnamon granola I no longer needed to buy. For years, I shopped automatically for everyone else. Lily liked strawberry yogurt tubes. Ethan only ate macaroni shaped like wheels instead of elbows. Daniel preferred turkey bacon because Melissa said pork was unhealthy. My grocery cart used to look like a small family survived from it. That morning, it held flowers, herbal tea, salmon fillets, and a hardcover mystery novel I wanted to read for myself. I remember staring at the cart for a second with an odd feeling I could not quite name. Freedom felt unfamiliar at first. The first call came 3 days after they returned from vacation. I was watering the mums on my front porch when Melissa's name flashed across my phone screen. Hi, Evelyn, she said quickly after I answered. Not Mom. Never Mom unless she wanted something softened. I was wondering if you could pick Lily up from school tomorrow. My Pilates instructor changed the class schedule, and Daniel has meetings all afternoon. I adjusted the watering hose slowly while looking across my quiet street lined with orange autumn leaves. I cannot tomorrow, I answered calmly. Silence. Oh, she sounded genuinely confused. Okay, well, what about Friday? I already have plans. Another silence followed, thinner this time. What kind of plans? I almost smiled at the question because people become strangely uncomfortable when women our age have lives they cannot access or control. Lunch with friends, I replied. The truth was I planned to sit alone beside the lake downtown with a turkey sandwich and my new book. But that still counted as plans. Melissa cleared her throat softly. Right. Okay. The call ended awkwardly, and for the first time in years, I did not feel guilty afterward. That was the part that surprised me most. I expected sadness, anger, maybe loneliness. Instead, I felt relief slowly stretching through my days like sunlight reaching neglected corners of a room. I stopped automatically volunteering for things. I stopped checking school calendars. I stopped reminding Daniel about birthdays, dentist appointments, and anniversaries. When Thanksgiving planning emails began circulating among relatives, I did not respond immediately like I always had before. Normally by October, I would already have spreadsheets printed, grocery lists prepared, guest bedrooms cleaned, and extra folding chairs rented from the church basement. Instead, I let the messages sit unopened while I sat wrapped in a blanket watching old movies with a bowl of buttered popcorn balanced on my lap. 3 days later, my sister Carol called laughing softly. Nobody knows what is happening for Thanksgiving, she told me. Your daughter-in-law started a group chat asking who is hosting, and apparently everyone assumed it was you. I stirred cream slowly into my coffee while listening. I see, I answered. Carol paused. Are you hosting? No, I said simply. I was not asked. That part mattered more than people realized. Families often expect women like me to continue giving without acknowledgement because they mistake reliability for obligation. But something inside me had shifted the night those empty chairs disappeared from my birthday table. I was no longer interested in begging people to value me correctly. A week later, Daniel stopped by unexpectedly after work. I heard his truck pull into the driveway just after sunset while I was roasting vegetables in the oven. The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary, and soft jazz played quietly from the little speaker near the sink. He stepped inside looking tired. Older somehow. "Hey, Mom," he said carefully while loosening his tie. His eyes moved around the kitchen as if noticing things for the first time. The spotless counters. The candles glowing softly near the window. The absence of chaos. "Something smells good. Dinner for one usually cooks faster," I replied gently. He looked down at the floor for a second. "Melissa is stressed," he admitted. "Things have been hectic lately." I nodded once, but said nothing. Because for the first time in a very long time, their problems were no longer automatically becoming mine. The first real crack appeared 3 weeks before Thanksgiving when Melissa called me at 6:45 on a rainy Tuesday morning, sounding completely different than usual. Gone was the polished voice she used around other people. This version sounded rushed, strained, almost breathless. "Evelyn, have you heard from Daniel?" she asked immediately after I answered. I stood in my kitchen spooning oatmeal into a ceramic bowl while soft rain tapped against the windows. "No," I answered calmly. "Why?" "He forgot Ethan's parent conference this morning." I said nothing for a second because Daniel had never remembered school schedules on his own. Not once. There was always someone quietly reminding him. Usually me. I had an early hair appointment and assumed he would handle it. Melissa continued. "Now the school is upset because nobody showed up." I stirred cinnamon slowly into my oatmeal while listening to the frustration in her voice build like pressure inside a sealed container. "I am sure you will figure it out," I replied gently. Silence. "Right," she said finally. "Of course." The call ended quickly after that, but it was only the beginning. Small problems started surfacing everywhere once I stopped managing the invisible details of their lives. Lily forgot her dance shoes twice in 1 month. Daniel missed his dental cleaning because nobody reminded him to confirm the appointment. Ethan showed up at school wearing pajama pants on Spirit Day because Melissa mixed up the calendar themes. Tiny things individually. Exhausting. Things collectively. The kind of constant mental labor women often carry, so quietly nobody notices until it disappears. And still, I stayed silent. Not cruel. Not vindictive. Simply absent from systems I had been maintaining for years without acknowledgement. One afternoon, I ran into Melissa at Target while shopping for scented candles and new bath towels. She looked exhausted. Her blonde hair was twisted into a hurried bun, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes she had unsuccessfully tried to cover with makeup. Ethan sat in the shopping cart whining for candy while Lily dragged a backpack behind her across the floor tiles. Melissa spotted me near the home section and immediately straightened her posture. "Oh," she said, startled. "Hi." "Hello, Melissa." Ethan suddenly lit up when he saw me. "Grandma," he shouted, reaching both arms out dramatically. Instinctively, I smiled and hugged him tightly against my coat. Children love without politics. Melissa exhaled heavily while rubbing her forehead. "This week has been insane," she muttered. "I swear I cannot keep track of anything anymore." I glanced down at the overflowing cart filled with frozen meals, unfolded clothes, and school supplies shoved carelessly together. Melissa used to tease me for making detailed shopping lists organized by aisle. "You make errands look military," she once laughed. "But structure only seems unnecessary to people benefiting from it. You always made this stuff look easy," she admitted quietly while Ethan tugged at her sleeve. There it was again. That word. Easy. I looked at her for a long moment then. Really looked at her. She was tired. Overwhelmed. Frustrated. But underneath all of it sat something else too. Entitlement. The quiet expectation that I would eventually step back into my role and rescue everyone from inconvenience. "It was never easy," I answered softly. "I just cared enough to make it look that way." For once, Melissa had no response ready. That evening, Daniel called around 9:30 while I sat wrapped in a blanket reading beside the fireplace. "Mom," he said carefully, "Melissa is overwhelmed." I turned a page slowly before answering. I gathered that. He sighed heavily. "Things have just been difficult lately." "Yes," I said. "Managing a household usually is." Silence settled between us. I could almost hear him realizing what I meant in real time. "Were things always this complicated?" he asked quietly after a moment. I looked around my peaceful living room. Soft lamplight. Warm tea resting beside me. The ticking grandfather clock your father once repaired every winter before he passed away. "Yes," I answered honestly. You just never noticed because I handled it before it reached you. He did not speak for several seconds after that. And for the first time since childhood, I think my son finally understood that comfort often rests on someone else's exhaustion. Thanksgiving finally collapsed the way old ceilings do after years of hidden water damage. Quietly at first, then all at once. It started 10 days before the holiday when my family group chat suddenly became frantic. Cousins asking what time dinner would start. My sister Carol asking who was bringing pies. Daniel asking if anyone had extra folding tables. Melissa sending 3 separate messages with increasing irritation because nobody had answered her quickly enough. I watched the notifications appear across my phone screen while sitting comfortably in a window seat at a small cafe downtown, stirring cream into hot tomato soup beside a rain-covered window. Normally by then, my guest rooms would already smell like fresh linen spray. The turkey would be ordered. Place cards handwritten. Every dietary restriction memorized. But this year, I simply silenced the conversation and kept reading my book. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Melissa. Evelyn. She said immediately after I answered, sounding strained. Nobody knows what is happening for Thanksgiving. I glanced outside at pedestrians hurrying beneath umbrellas while soft jazz drifted through the cafe speakers. That sounds stressful, I replied calmly. Well, she hesitated. You always hosted. Hosted. Interesting word choice. Not we appreciated your work. Not we hoped to continue the tradition. Just the assumption that my labor existed permanently for public use. I was not asked this year, I said. Softly. Another silence. I guess we assumed, she started before trailing off awkwardly. Exactly, I thought. You assumed. The grocery stores are already picked over, Melissa continued nervously. And Daniel forgot to reserve extra chairs from the church. Plus my parents already booked flights. I listened quietly while she listed problem after problem. Every one of them a detail I normally handled weeks earlier without anyone noticing. Invisible work only becomes visible when it stops being done. I am sure you will figure something out, I answered gently. Her voice tightened immediately. Evelyn, come on. The entire family expects Thanksgiving. I looked down at my reflection in the spoon resting beside my soup bowl. For years, I had mistaken being needed for being valued. They are not the same thing. I hope everyone enjoys the holiday. I replied calmly before ending the call. The next few days grew increasingly chaotic for them. Carol called me twice laughing in disbelief after hearing different relatives complain. Apparently Melissa attempted hosting herself, but forgot half the grocery order and underestimated how many pounds of turkey were needed for 19 people. Daniel accidentally double-booked Ethan's soccer tournament the same weekend visiting relatives arrived. Nobody coordinated sleeping arrangements. One cousin booked a hotel 40 minutes away because no one answered her messages in time. The entire thing spiraled exactly the way systems do when the person quietly maintaining them finally steps away. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright, with pale sunlight stretching across my kitchen floor. I woke slowly, brewed cinnamon coffee, and made cranberry walnut pancakes for myself, while instrumental Christmas music played softly from the speaker near the stove. No rushing. No 40-pound turkey. No sink overflowing with dishes before sunrise. Just peace. Around 11 o'clock, Daniel called. I could hear chaos behind him immediately. Children crying. Multiple voices talking over each other. Cabinet doors slamming. Mom, he said, exhausted already. Melissa burned the rolls, and the turkey is still half frozen in the center. I flipped a pancake carefully while listening. That is unfortunate. Nobody can find the extra plates, he continued. And Uncle Frank is upset because lunch is delayed 3 hours. In the background, I heard Melissa snap sharply at someone before muttering something under her breath. Then silence for a second. Honestly, Daniel admitted quietly, I did not realize how much work you handled every year. There it was. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. Finally, I carried my coffee to the dining table near the window and sat down slowly. Outside, leaves drifted across the empty street while the smell of maple syrup still lingered warmly in the house. Holidays are not magic, Daniel, I said softly. Someone creates them. He did not answer right away. I think he was standing there in the middle of his noisy kitchen, finally understanding that family traditions do not survive on love alone. They survive because somewhere in the background, usually unnoticed, one woman sacrifices her peace to make everyone else comfortable. The difference now was that I had finally decided to keep my peace for myself. December arrived with freezing rain and a kind of silence I had once been afraid of, but now protected carefully. My house no longer sounded like obligation. No constant buzzing phone. No last-minute schedule changes. No rushing to solve emergencies that somehow always became mine. Instead, my mornings became slow and deliberate. I lit candles while coffee brewed. I read books by the fireplace wrapped in soft blankets. Some afternoons, I drove 30 minutes to the waterfront just to watch gray waves roll against the docks while gulls circled overhead. Peace feels unfamiliar when you have spent decades earning your worth through exhaustion. But little by little, I was learning not to apologize for resting. Daniel started calling more often after Thanksgiving. Not demanding, not careless, different, like someone slowly waking up from a long sleep. One evening, he stopped by after work carrying takeout containers from my favorite Italian restaurant. The air outside smelled like snow, and his shoulders sagged heavily beneath his dark wool coat when I opened the front door. "I brought dinner," he said quietly. I stepped aside without a word. We ate at the kitchen table while soft Christmas lights reflected against the windows behind him. Fettuccine Alfredo for me. Lasagna for him. For several minutes. Only the sound of silverware against ceramic plates filled the room. Then Daniel finally exhaled deeply and rubbed his forehead. "Melissa and I have been fighting a lot," he admitted. I took a slow sip of water, but said nothing. He looked around the kitchen then, really noticing it. The clean counters. The organized pantry shelves visible through the glass door. The calmness. "I used to think this stuff just happened naturally," he said quietly. "The holidays. The schedules. Everything running smoothly." I folded my napkin carefully onto my lap. "Most people do," I answered. "Until the person doing it stops." He nodded slowly like the truth physically hurt to hear out loud. "Melissa says you changed after your birthday." I looked down at the candle flickering softly between us. "No," I said gently. "I just stopped overextending myself for people who expected it." That sentence settled heavily across the table. Daniel leaned back in his chair and stared down at his hands for several seconds before speaking again. "I should have called you that night," he admitted quietly. "At the restaurant." The honesty in his voice surprised me because excuses usually arrived before accountability with him. "Yes," I answered simply. He swallowed hard. "I thought keeping Melissa happy would avoid conflict." "And did it?" I asked softly. He let out a short, humorless laugh before shaking his head. Outside, freezing rain tapped steadily against the windows while warm garlic and butter still lingered in the kitchen air. "Everything feels tense lately," he admitted. "The kids are overwhelmed. Melissa is stressed all the time. We keep arguing over little things." I almost told him that little things become heavy when nobody is quietly carrying them anymore. But instead, I remained silent. Sometimes people need room to arrive at truth themselves. Daniel looked around the room again, slower this time. His eyes landed on the stack of travel brochures sitting near the edge of the counter. "Charleston, Maine coastlines, river cruises through Europe. You planning a trip?" he asked. "Several, actually." His expression shifted immediately. Confusion first, then discomfort. "You never used to travel during the holidays." "I never used to prioritize myself either," I replied calmly. That seemed to affect him more than anger would have. Because disappointment can still leave room for negotiation. Peace does not. Before leaving, he stood awkwardly near the front door while pulling on his gloves. "The kids miss you," he said quietly. I smiled softly because I missed them too. Innocent people often suffer quietly inside adult selfishness. "I miss them as well," I answered. "Then maybe things can go back to normal soon," he said hopefully. There it was. The real reason for the visit finally surfacing beneath the apologies and reflective conversations. Back to normal. Back to me fixing everything. Back to me disappearing into service while everyone else enjoyed the comfort it created. I reached for the doorknob slowly and opened it to the cold December air. "Daniel," I said gently. Normal was not working for me. He stood there speechless for a moment while snow began drifting softly onto the porch between us. And for the first time in his life, my son looked at me not as a safety net or a solution, but as a woman entirely capable of choosing herself. 2 days before Christmas Eve, Melissa arrived at my house alone carrying a tin of peppermint cookies she clearly had not baked herself. Snow covered the edges of my front lawn in soft, uneven patches, and the evening sky had already turned dark blue by 4:30. I saw her standing on the porch through the frosted glass beside my front door, shifting nervously in her expensive beige coat while cold wind pushed strands of blonde hair across her face. For a moment, I simply stood in the hallway watching her. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. There was a time I would have rushed to open the door immediately, worried someone might feel uncomfortable waiting outside. Women like me are trained to anticipate discomfort before it even fully forms. But healing teaches you to pause. I opened the door slowly. "Hi, Evelyn," she said with a tight smile, holding up the cookie tin awkwardly like a peace offering. I was in the neighborhood. I almost admired the performance. "Come in," I answered calmly. The warmth of the house wrapped around us immediately. Cinnamon candles flickered softly near the fireplace, and instrumental piano music played quietly from the living room speaker. Melissa stepped inside carefully, glancing around the same way Daniel had weeks earlier. People notice peace when they are no longer living inside it. I took her coat and hung it neatly near the front closet while she stood uncertainly in the foyer. "Tea?" I asked. "Please." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table while snow drifted steadily outside the windows. Melissa wrapped both hands around the mug I placed in front of her like she was trying to warm more than her fingers. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she exhaled deeply. "I know things have been weird lately," she began carefully. "Weird. Such a gentle word for emotional abandonment." I stirred honey slowly into my tea and waited. "Daniel has been under a lot of stress," she continued. "The kids have too. Honestly, everybody misses how things used to be." There it was again. Not "we miss you." We miss how things used to function for us. I remained quiet long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. Melissa shifted slightly in her chair before speaking again. "I think maybe your birthday became a bigger issue than anyone expected." I looked out the window toward the snow-covered backyard where tiny white lights glowed softly along the fence line. "My birthday was never the real issue," I said gently. Her brow tightened in confusion. "Then what was?" I turned back toward her slowly. "The issue was realizing my value to this family only became obvious once I stopped giving everything away for free." The words landed heavily between us. Melissa blinked twice before looking down at her untouched tea. For the first time since I had known her, she looked less polished, less certain. "I did not mean to hurt you," she admitted quietly. "I just thought," she stopped herself. "You thought I would understand," I finished softly. She nodded once. "You always did before." That sentence carried more truth than she realized. Yes, I always understood. I understood scheduling conflicts, stress, parenthood, exhaustion. I understood everyone so completely that eventually nobody bothered understanding me in return. Melissa's eyes drifted around the kitchen again. The organized shelves, fresh flowers near the sink, the peaceful stillness. "Daniel says you are planning trips now," she said carefully. "Maybe even selling the house eventually." "I am considering it." Her expression shifted immediately. Panic flickered across her face before she could hide it. Because suddenly the future looked different to her. No nearby babysitter. No guaranteed holiday host. No emotional safety net living 15 minutes away. "The kids love coming here," she said quickly. "And honestly, we always assumed this house would kind of stay the center of everything." I almost smiled at the honesty of that statement. They built comfort around my sacrifice so naturally they mistook it for permanence. "Melissa," I said softly, "I spent years making everyone else feel at home while quietly disappearing inside my own life." Her eyes filled slightly then, though whether from guilt or fear of losing convenience, I could not fully tell. "We never thought you would pull away like this," she whispered. I looked down at my tea before answering. "That is because none of you imagined I was allowed to." The room fell silent after that except for the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the steady whisper of snow against the windows. And for the first time since becoming part of this family, Melissa finally looked at me not as support staff disguised as a mother-in-law, but as a person who had reached the limit of what she was willing to sacrifice for acceptance. By the following autumn, my life no longer revolved around waiting for people to remember my worth. That was the real difference. Not anger, not revenge, freedom. The morning of my 64th birthday began with ocean air drifting through partially open balcony doors while pale sunlight spread slowly across white hotel sheets. I stood barefoot on the balcony of a small coastal resort in Charleston wrapped in a soft cream-colored robe, holding a warm cup of coffee between my hands as waves rolled quietly against the shoreline below. Seagulls drifted above the water, and somewhere farther down the beach, an older couple walked hand in hand through the wet sand. The air smelled like salt and fresh rain. Peace has a scent when you finally reach it. A year earlier, I would have already been awake for hours coordinating reservations, confirming arrival times, and making sure everyone else felt comfortable. That morning, the only schedule I had was a spa appointment at noon and dinner reservations for one at a little seafood restaurant overlooking the marina. My phone buzzed softly against the bedside table behind me. Then again, and again. I already knew who it was without looking. Daniel had started calling at 7 that morning. Melissa sent flowers to the hotel lobby the night before along with a handwritten note that simply read, "We hope you have a beautiful birthday." Not performative this time, just honest. People change slowly when comfort disappears long enough to expose character underneath it. I eventually walked back inside and glanced down at my phone screen. 7 missed calls, 3 voice messages, 2 videos from the children singing happy birthday, slightly off-key, while Ethan laughed halfway through the song. I smiled despite myself. Some wounds heal quietly once people finally stop defending the behavior that caused them. Around 8:30, my phone rang again. Daniel. This time, I answered. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said immediately. His voice sounded softer these days, less distracted. "Thank you." I sat near the balcony doors while warm ocean wind moved gently through the room curtains. "Where are you right now?" he asked. "Charleston." He laughed quietly. "You really meant it when you said you were going to start living differently." I looked out toward the water again. "Yes," I answered simply. Silence settled warmly between us for a moment before he spoke again. "The kids miss you a lot." "I miss them too. Melissa does too." I noticed he did not rush to defend anyone anymore. That had changed over the year. Accountability matured him in ways comfort never could. "She said you were right," he admitted carefully. "About everything." I leaned back slowly in the chair beside the window. "No," I corrected gently. "I was just tired." He exhaled softly on the other end of the line. "I did not see it before," he said quietly. "How much you carried for all of us." Outside, waves crashed softly against the shore below while sunlight danced across the water in silver reflections. "Most people do not," I replied. "Not until the person carrying everything finally sets it down." Another pause followed. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice lower this time. "I am sorry you felt alone." I closed my eyes briefly after hearing that because, strangely enough, those were the exact words I had needed a year earlier. Not excuses, not explanations. Recognition. "Thank you," I answered softly. After the call ended, I sat quietly for several minutes listening to the ocean. No resentment remained inside me anymore. That surprised me most of all. Somewhere between the empty restaurant chairs, the failed holidays, the quiet withdrawals, and the peaceful mornings alone, I had stopped needing revenge entirely. Because peace accomplishes something anger never can. It returns you to yourself. That evening, I walked alone along the marina wearing a light sweater while soft golden lights reflected across the water from nearby restaurants and sailboats. Couples laughed over dinner. Music drifted faintly through the warm night air. My phone buzzed once more inside my purse, but this time I did not rush to answer immediately. I simply kept walking slowly beside the water with the breeze against my face and the sound of waves following beside me. For the first time in many years, my birthday belonged completely to me. And somehow, that felt like the greatest gift of all.